When I first started at Trent University, I was exposed to a number of different community-based research avenues. So in first year environmental science, we had like a service learning project where I was able to help out in Halliburton and do work with the Halliburton Water Festival. I ended up actually doing another community-based research project, this time with the city of Kawartha Lakes, and I was working with Kawartha Conservation. And I did a project on greywater discharge in the Kawartha Lakes along the Trent-Severn waterway. So then for my fourth year of university, I decided to take an undergrad thesis. So for 2 semesters, I did a project here in Harper Park for the city of Peterborough, but like linked with the city of Peterborough, but for Peterborough Green Up and for the Peterborough Field Naturalists in some ways. With most community-based research, you find that an organization comes to a linking agency, whether that be Trent Center or U-Links in Halliburton or C-Links, which no longer exists but was in the Kawarthas. So the organization comes with a proposal for a project that needs addressing or a question that needs answering, and then they link that with a student who's interested in performing that research. But when you come together, there's sort of this initial stage where you're still forming the idea, you're still paring down the question, and you're still trying to figure out the methodology for how you're going to get your answers. So ultimately it becomes this collaborative process of figuring out what are your goals from an academic standpoint, from the organization standpoint, and also maybe what are your passions or interests as well. And then from there it becomes this collaborative process of deciding how you're going to go about answering those questions that you identify. I became involved mainly because I wanted to do an undergrad thesis and I wanted to continue doing community-based research. I knew that I was interested in community green spaces and in water quality, and so those were my 2 starting points. And so I actually went out to look for an organization whose needs I could fill without that linking agency to begin with. So I didn't come straight through the Trent Community-Based Research Center. But instead, I directly approached Green Up and I said, what kinds of projects are you looking at, or what kind of need can I fill through research that I can do? And they said to me, well, we've got this rain garden project and we've been looking at the impact of stormwater on urban watersheds and we're trying to figure out where we should put them. So okay, that's a great idea. So that sounds like a project in and of itself.
Emily Ammon actually approached us with the project that she had in mind. We had, up until that point, completed a number of rain garden projects within the city, and we were interested in looking at how they might be performing in terms of the effect they might be having on urban runoff, or mitigating against urban heat island effects, or the general ecology of how they might be functioning in that respect.
But when I brought that back to my supervisor at Trent, he kind of added one more layer of complexity, which is that the first place where they've put one rain garden in is in the Harper Creek watershed. But now there was ongoing development that was proposed, and there was other pressures that were facing the watershed. And so in order to deal with the flooding risks and the other kinds of stormwater issues that were going to take place from this development, it would be really important to just focus on this watershed itself.
Emily's project was great. So it evolved a little bit, and what we ended up settling on was an evaluation of a watershed in the south end of Peterborough that has some fairly ecologically significant features, but is under stress from all sorts of different development pressures going on within the city.
At the same time, they identified policy issues that were going on in Peterborough too, around stormwater and how we deal with imperviousness, which is this issue of hard surfaces and not having the ability for stormwater to drain.
We started with the most fun thing to do, which was a tour. We got together on a lovely Sunday afternoon and we toured the watershed, and we talked about how it was laid out, how the groundwater movement happened, how the surface water movement happened, where the connections were, and where I felt through my experience in the watershed there might be opportunities to put in low impact development technologies to facilitate retaining that water balance or restoring that water balance to closer to pre-development conditions.
In my first semester of the project, I took hydrology. And I did not think I was going to be able to do my project. Halfway through the class, I was looking at my project and I was looking at my difficulties with just the fundamentals of hydrology. And I was thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to completely do it over. Like, I'm going to have to change my project. This is not going to happen. But I persevered and I spent extra time with my prof, and I actually got his input when I was, implementing what I was doing from my class into my project, basically right after I would learn it. And he helped me and guided me through that process. And so even though I had a supervisor that was not in hydrology, I had other academic support through my taking a hydrology course at Trent. And then the following semester I was lucky and I took a watershed management course. And so that course also fundamentally supported my project and helped me to gain the GIS skills needed in order to produce the maps and identify hotspots and model where these rain gardens should go. So all of that is to say that you don't necessarily need the academic backing at the beginning of the project, because if you're willing to work, it can all be facilitated through the project itself and through some background courses that may be necessary to fill in those information gaps.
She did a pretty comprehensive piece of work where she mapped out the watershed lot by lot, determining the runoff value or the amount of water that runs off the property in a storm event.
It wasn't easy, but it was definitely something that I was proud to accomplish, and that helped me moving forwards too, because it made me realize, like, even if I don't know the answer to something, it doesn't mean I can't find the answer. And even if a concept doesn't come easily, you'll still get there eventually. You just need the time and the effort.
Towards the end of the project, she ended up presenting to City Council, which, as far as I'm aware, I don't know of any other projects that have had a student present their findings to City Council. Emily's proposals, as they were brought towards City Council under a stormwater funding fee that was put forward by staff and a committee in the springtime, were very informative, and I think helped provide some context for many of the city councilors who might not necessarily have a background in these sorts of issues.
I really just came in and talked to them about what is green infrastructure, what does our stormwater system here in Peterborough even look like, and how can I save them money by putting in these rain gardens, this green infrastructure, and how can we do it through policy to have the best impact on flood reduction and water quality for our lakes and streams.
We really need to inform the decisions we're making as a community in a more fact-based manner. So connecting our post-secondary institutions with our city council to help them make decisions is critical.
Conventional research often does inform the way that things are done in the public sphere, but people aren't often aware of the research when it's being done. They often try to get rid of as many variables as possible, right? That's sort of the scientific method. You only want to test one thing, and so it's in a silo. But the reality of environmental problems especially, but also most problems in our society, is that they're what we call wicked problems, which means that they cross many disciplines. They're not just a social issue, they're not just an environmental issue, they're not just an issue of chemistry or biology, it's all interlinked. And so that's sort of where this community-based piece comes in, is that you're starting to take what I would call a wicked approach to the wicked problems in incorporating multiple forms of science, multiple ways of knowing, multiple stakeholders, and looking at how those all impact the central issue.